I do a bit of job here. I started buying and selling stuff. Basically educated myself. And then I'd always been buying and selling stuff. My dad had a little coin shop, and I wanted a pawn shop.
He has said those words before. In fact, he has said them 4 times to 4 different women, each time believing it would be forever. But this time, something feels undeniably different. At 61 years old, the Pawn Stars frontman has just walked down the aisle for a 5th time. Why would a man who has been burned by love so many times risk it all again? And who is this woman who has finally captured the heart of a man who has seemingly had everything? Join us as we uncover the one woman Rick Harrison admits is the only love of his life. The missing puzzle piece. After 4 failed marriages and decades of searching, Rick Harrison had resigned himself to the possibility that lasting love simply wasn't in the cards for him. Then Angie walked into his life, and everything changed. Rick was approaching 60, carrying so much grief more than anyone should bear. He had just lost his son, his dad, and his mom, and had been divorced 4 times. Life felt lonely until he met a certain 42-year-old registered nurse from Las Vegas, Angie. Maybe because of her occupation, but it was Angie's warm smile that immediately disarmed him. She had traveled the world, from Austria to Dubai to Canada, and had a perspective on life that made Rick feel like he could breathe again. She didn't care about what he was worth. All she cared about was him, the man who had spent a lifetime searching for love. As they say, when you know, you just know. The couple met at the start of 2024, and by June, their relationship was confirmed. By February 2025, Rick already knew where he wanted the relationship to lead. So he went down on one knee with a breathtaking 6.5-carat pear-shaped diamond ring from his own gold and silver pawn shop. The proposal itself was characteristically Rick, unromantic and practical, happening in his living room, which his stepdaughters later derided as the most unromantic proposal ever. But Rick wanted to get it right. So he proposed a second time during a vacation in Chile, this time getting down on one knee at a vineyard in Casablanca, surrounded by the beauty of the Andes. He wanted to give her a moment she would never forget. On January 3, 2026, the couple married at the Little White Chapel in Las Vegas, with an Elvis Presley impersonator officiating. It was a small, intimate ceremony, just the way Angie wanted it. But after 2 proposals, Rick decided to also do something special for his bride, and so arranged a second ceremony on January 26th in Cancun, Mexico. It was an intimate beach party, attended by approximately 60 to 70 guests. His son Jake served as his best man, and his former stepdaughter, Marissa, did Angie's makeup. The wedding was perfect, with the beach, the ocean, and the setting sun watching them as they said their vows. But what made Angie truly special was not the weddings or the ring. It was how she loved him through what was the darkest time of his life. After he lost his son, Rick second-guessed everything. Could he have done more? Could he have saved his son? Could he have been a better father? The grief was a black hole threatening to swallow him whole. Angie sat with him through the sleepless nights, held him when he broke down, and gently pushed him to keep living when he wanted to retreat from the world entirely. Rick has declared boldly and publicly that Angie is, in fact, the only love of his life. Everything in his past had led him to finding the piece that completed the puzzle he had been trying to solve his entire life. But that doesn't mean she is the only one he has ever loved. And the first person was not even his wife. Rick's supermom. Rick's childhood was such a very bumpy ride that the world probably would have never met the now popular TV star. Rick was born on March 22, 1965, in Lexington, North Carolina, as the second of 4 children. Sadly, when he was just 8 years old, he was diagnosed with epilepsy. He'd experienced grand mal seizures so frequently that they would leave him bedridden for extended periods. He spent much of his time in bed, unable to move, unable to play like other children. For a young boy, this was a form of imprisonment, trapped in his own body, watching the world go on without him. His father, Richard, a U.S. Navy veteran, taught him about discipline and hard work. But his mother, Joanne Rue Harrison, refused to let the illness defeat her son. She didn't treat him as an invalid or an object of pity. Instead, she brought him books, encouraged his reading, and insisted that his mind was still sharp even when his body was not. She had no idea that those books she had handed him were the key to his future. Rick devoured books during those long, immobile hours. He read about the Royal Navy from the late 18th century to the early 19th century, memorizing details about ships, battles, and naval strategy that would later serve him in the pawn business. He read about history, physics, and the mechanics of the world around him. But the books that influenced him most were the Great Brain series by John D. Fitzgerald. The series featured a 10-year-old protagonist named Tom D. Fitzgerald, a con artist with an uncanny ability to conjure up money-making schemes. Rick saw himself in that character, a boy with a sharp mind who could talk his way into and out of anything, a boy who could think his way out of any predicament. After the collapse of the Harrisons' real estate business in 1981, the family had to relocate to Las Vegas. 16-year-old Rick found it so difficult to transition and start over in a city that could not have been more different from North Carolina. But his mom continued to provide the stability he needed. Even when Rick dropped out of high school in 10th grade to pursue business, Joanne didn't lecture him. She simply trusted the son she had raised. But the relationship between Rick and his mother wasn't without its issues. Just a few years ago, in 2022, Joanne sued her son over a dispute concerning family assets and the ownership of the Las Vegas business. She even alleged that he had forced her to sign over her business interest just after she had awakened from a coma, and that he had stopped sending her money from his father's share of the business. It was painful watching mother and son clash over the very empire they had built together. But despite the legal disputes, their bond remained unbreakable until Joanne passed away at age 85 in 2025. Her demise, just 7 years after his father's, broke him. Still, her legacy lived on in everything he had achieved and the resilience she taught him, which carried him through every stage of his life, especially his first marriage. His very first love. Armed with the self-education his mother had nurtured and the drive to succeed his father had instilled, Rick set out to make his way in the world after dropping out. But he was still a teenage boy, trying to figure out life when his girlfriend Kim became pregnant. Although the couple later suffered a miscarriage, that didn't drive them apart. Instead, they decided to marry anyway, with the hope that their young, innocent love could conquer the odds. The young couple wedded in 1982, and just 1 year later, their first son, Corey, was born. Within 2 years, they had another boy, Adam. By Adam's birth, Rick was just 18 years old, and already had the weight of marriage and fatherhood settled on his shoulders. He was working odd jobs, trying to figure out how to support a wife and 2 children when he could barely support himself. The pressure was immense, and the financial strain was constant. With everything going on, the marriage wasn't destined to last, and Rick and Kim soon separated. By 1985, they were officially divorced. Even though it was a short union, it produced two sons who would become Rick's North Stars. Corey became a big part of the family business and the television show that made them famous, trained to eventually take over the pawn shop and carry on the Harrison dynasty. Adam, on the other hand, preferred to stay out of the spotlight, working at the shop for a time before becoming a plumber and choosing a life away from the cameras. That first failed marriage left Rick single, broke, and searching for direction. He had lost his wife, but he still had two sons to raise, and the weight of that responsibility pushed him to find a new path forward. For better, for 20-something years. After his divorce from Kim, Rick spent time bumming around, trying to find himself and a job. He was flat broke, a far cry from the multi-million-dollar net worth he would later accumulate. But fate had other plans. 9 months after separating from Kim, Rick met a woman from West Virginia named Tracy on a blind double date. She was everything Rick wasn't at the time, grounded and patient. They dated for 6 months, moved in together, and 8 months later, they married in 1986, assuming the responsibility of raising Corey and Adam. Tracy stepped into the role of stepmother to Rick's two young sons. In 2003, she also gave Rick a son of their own, Jake. Tracy worked alongside Rick at the gold and silver pawn shop for years, and Rick later praised her as a great employee with an extremely calm manner. She left the store in 2003 after giving birth to Jake. In the early days of the pawn shop, when money was tight and customers were scarce, Tracy's presence kept things from falling apart. Her own calmness balanced Rick's intensity, and she brought in her own regular customers, particularly from the trans community, helping to diversify the shop's clientele. For 25 years, Rick and Tracy built a life together. It was by far his longest marriage, spanning from 1986 to 2011. The marriage endured through the opening of the gold and silver pawn shop in 1989, the rise of Pawn Stars in 2009, and the family's transformation from struggling pawnbrokers to international television personalities. When Rick met Tracy, he later admitted in his autobiography that he didn't bring much to the table, but over a quarter century, they built something substantial together. Sadly, for reasons unknown, the couple eventually divorced in 2011. All we know is that the divorce came just 2 years after Pawn Stars premiered. Maybe the pressures of sudden fame, the demands of a television schedule, and the stresses of being in the public eye finally took their toll on a marriage that had endured for decades. Or perhaps, after 25 years, two people simply grew apart. But when Rick looks back on the empire he built, Tracy's fingerprints are all over it. And the end of that marriage, after a quarter century, left Rick adrift once again. A pandemic, divorce, and wedding. By the time Rick would meet his third wife, he was now a much different man. He was older and significantly richer. Moreover, he was popular. He and Deanna Burdett tied the knot in July 2013 in Laguna Beach, California, at the Ritz-Carlton. Deanna was also a two-time divorcee, and both Rick and Deanna were taking their third shot at marriage. Rick proposed on Valentine's Day in 2012 with a 2.5-carat diamond ring, optimistically declaring that the third time is the charm. The wedding itself was befitting of Rick's reality TV star personality. Danny Coker from Counting Cars officiated in front of 180 guests who were treated to a live performance by the rock band Steel Panther. Guests were sent home with bobbleheads of the happy couple. But beneath all that glitz, there was genuine hope. Deanna brought 3 daughters, Serena, Tiana, and Marissa, into Rick's life, and Rick embraced his role as stepfather. He noted the perfect symmetry of their blended family. He had 3 boys from his previous marriages, and she had 3 girls. They were, in his words, basically the Brady Bunch. He developed genuine bonds with the girls, bonds that would endure even after the marriage ended. For 7 years, they were one big family, and it wasn't until 2021 that the news surfaced that Rick had filed for divorce during the pandemic, citing irreconcilable differences. Apparently, the couple had grown apart to the point where they couldn't continue the marriage. Rick revealed that the split was a mutual decision and that he had gained 3 great daughters from the union, even as the marriage itself ended. It was a sad but graceful ending to a marriage that had promised so much. Rick didn't stay single for long. In 2021, he rushed into his 4th marriage with Amanda Palmer. This one only lasted till 2023, and unlike his previous marriages, they had no kids and barely left any public footprint together. It just seemed like he had desperately tried to fill a void and failed quickly at it. After so many failures, most people would have given up, but not Rick Harrison. He kept moving forward, still searching for the love that had eluded him 4 times. The wilderness years. Between his 4th divorce in 2023 and finding Angie, Rick Harrison was anything but idle. He had spent decades building something far greater than a simple pawn shop. He had built an empire. The Gold and Silver Pawn Shop, founded in 1989 with his father, Richard Benjamin Harrison, had become the cornerstone of his wealth. But Rick was the one who pushed for the pawn shop to become an entertainment empire. When Pawn Stars premiered on the History Channel in 2009, it transformed the family business into a global phenomenon. The show earned Rick a reported $100,000 per episode, and by 2023, his net worth was estimated at a comfortable $9 million. Rick's success was built on more than just television fame. His deep knowledge of history and physics, cultivated during his bedridden childhood with his mother Joanne by his side, served him well in the pawn business, where expertise in antiques and historical artifacts is essential. He once held Saddam Hussein's fingerprints in his palm, but the object that moved him most was a surgeon's kit from World War I, because his father had been a Navy man, and Rick had spent his sickly childhood reading about that very war. Over the years, he had also come across a dinosaur egg, an ancient Egyptian mummy mask, a handwritten letter from George Washington, and a shield of Henry II of France. He was also a big car guy, with a collection that included a 1940 Chevrolet Special Deluxe, a 1966 Corona Imperial convertible that once belonged to his father, and a modern 2020 Ford F-150 Raptor. Despite all his success, he could still feel like something was missing. Every time he married, he had always thought it was forever. In fact, he never had a prenup with any of his wives. All he wanted was that love and comfort of having a home. It didn't help matters when he lost his 2nd son, Adam Harrison, early in 2024. Adam had struggled with drug problems since his 20s, and Rick had put him through rehab so many times he had lost count. Each time, Adam would do well for a while, and each time, he would fall back. But Adam was only 39 when a fentanyl overdose came out of nowhere and took him, leaving behind the kind of sudden, senseless loss that leaves you reeling long after the dust settles. Rick didn't try to sugarcoat it. He talked openly about the shame and the stigma, about how he felt he had failed as a father. For a guy who'd spent his whole life figuring out the value of things, this was a brutal reminder that some losses just can't be fixed or bought. And maybe that's why Angie's timing felt so uncanny. She didn't come in trying to patch him up or fill some gaping void. She just showed up and reminded him what it felt like to have a home again. As for the show that made him famous, Pawn Stars has undergone a major transformation in recent years. After filming 25 seasons, the series went on indefinite hiatus in 2025, when History Channel opted not to renew the contract. Rick's son Corey, known as Big Hoss, had already left Las Vegas for Tulum, Mexico in September 2024 and made it clear he would not return. But the franchise is far from dead. In December 2025, history confirmed that new episodes would begin filming in early 2026 and premiere in early 2027. This time, Rick and Chumlee will be the co-stars, with Corey moving on to his own podcast and a barbecue venture in Mexico. Rick and Chumlee have already launched a spin-off podcast called Pawn After Dark, recorded from the back room of Gold and Silver Pawn. The show Rick built from the ground up is entering a new era, one that, much like his personal life, has finally found a new rhythm. Even though their marriage has only just started, the two have known each other for 2 years now. For Rick, a man who has been married 5 times, to finally call this woman the only love of his life, it is safe to say that maybe he has indeed found his happily ever after. What do you think? Can a man who has been married 5 times truly find the only love of his life this late in the game? Or is Rick simply caught up in the honeymoon phase all over again? And do you believe that anyone could find true love, no matter how long it takes? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.